you, Professor. Could you please share your thoughts on the statistics that were shared just now and on today's topic? Professor?
Yeah. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I thank Jamia Singapore for organizing a useful and needful topic of today in the presence of COVID endemic. And we all know that elders are the treasures for their families, and their knowledge, experience, and wisdom definitely will guide us during the time of crisis and distress. But it is our duty to see to that our elders don't go through the stages of crisis at any time. As age advances, there are a lot of changes happening in the body, both physically and mentally. Physically, there is a decline of senses. For example, vision, hearing, smell, taste all come down, and your the walking becomes a little difficult by making them more prone for injuries, and digestive capacity is reduced, as also the appetite, and their sleep is reduced. And in addition, there are some hormonal changes which happen in the body. In women, we all know there is a menopause, so where the hormone levels go down, and in men it causes andropause. But the basic problem is the bone health, bone density becomes less, and they are more prone for fractures even with minor injuries. And in addition to this, there is cognitive decline. At this point of juncture, let me explain what is, for viewers, what is cognition. Cognition includes memory and language, where suppose we communication, we ask question, the patient understand and gives back. So the communication. And visuospatial orientation, that is the patient knowing about where is he and about the surroundings. And the execution, which is planning for the future. So these qualities will slowly come down. In addition to this, they have medical factors, like when the age advances, and most of them, they have hypertension, diabetes, and heart becomes weak with heart attack sometimes, or bypass surgery causing some cardiac failure, and there is arthritis with joint pain and other things. So these issues, these problems will reduce the patient's mobility and activity. In addition, they have some social issues, like the people who were earlier in the position and power, suddenly they loses the power, and they are dependent on someone, and for everything they have to ask permission, like, so the esteem, self-esteem comes down, and which amounts to later depression and anxiety in the elderly. So having said these problems, based on this, aging can be classified into three categories. The first one being healthy aging, where the elders, they don't have any decline, which I have narrated now. They are very well off. Even if there is decline, is very minimal, which is not visible. They are very active physically, mentally, and socially, and this is called healthy aging. They don't have any illnesses like hypertension, diabetes, whatever it is. That is next. We have normal aging. So the normal aging will have all components of decline, which I mentioned now. In addition, they have medical illnesses like hypertension, diabetes, all those things. And next is abnormal aging or pathological aging, where, as I mentioned, the cognitive mental function very grossly decline, so that they cannot function individually. So now we have three options. Leave alone the healthy aging, at least aim for normal aging. So between normal aging one side, and you have got dementia where there is cognitive decline happen, and in between we have got something called minimal cognitive insufficiency, like MCI it is called. And what is the difference between normal aging and MCI is, normal aging, the people, they do their functions individually, day-to-day activities they carry out individually without any problems. With the demented patients, they have difficulty in doing day-to-day activities. But this MCI, minimal cognitive impairment people, MCI, people with MCI, they can do normal activities, but the difference is the relatives or even the patients sometimes, they notice that they have got some deficiencies. So that is the difference. So when someone has dementia in your house, the world becomes very smaller. It is very obvious. The visits of the family members and friends and come down, and you are in fact isolated. Of course, a form of quarantine, even without COVID, I will say. So with this, I'll leave it to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. So basically, the 3 points which I have gathered would be healthy aging, normal aging, and abnormal or pathological aging. So it is, if we can't achieve healthy aging, at least we try to achieve normal aging. Yeah?
Correct.
Okay, thank you, Prof. And now over to Dr. Krisnan. Dr. Chris, your view on today's topic, please.
All right, thank you. So I'm a psychogeriatrician. So I'm actually a psychiatrist by training. I take care of elderly and look into their mental health. So in my line of work, I see a lot of elderly with dementia and mental health issues. I also conduct caregiver workshop and also train partners as well. So when I'm in contact with the public, caregiver and patients, I always like to ask them one thing, which is, what is dementia? How do you know that someone has dementia? And actually, a lot of people can tell me, what Prof mentioned earlier on, the cognitive symptoms. Can't remember things, lose their way, cannot recognize family, things that they can do in the past and now they can't, So I think the public has a very good awareness about this, which is fantastic. But I thought today I'll share a little bit about something that's perhaps a bit less known. It's actually called BPSD. So BPSD in full is behavioral and psychological symptoms of dementia. It's actually an umbrella term, which means that it refers to a range of symptoms. It's really very broad. It actually ranges from emotions to behavior, to actually personality changes, and also movements. So emotions is also a range within this category. Too happy, too sad. Anything too extreme is not always that great, right? Sometimes they get very anxious as well. Also, under emotions, some of the elderly with dementia get agitated, they get very angry easily, so there's a lot of irritability. And the other extreme can happen as well, which is a total lack of emotions. Patients who actually, suddenly just lose interest in a lot of things. They don't like to go out anymore, and they don't seem to be motivated about a lot of things. So this is actually the emotional aspect of BPSD. And in behavior, there's often very frequently changes in their sleep and appetite. Okay, so usually sleeping less, eating less, and in very small amount, they actually have what Prof mentioned earlier as well, psychosis, which is actually a situation whereby the elderly start to lose touch with what is real and what is unreal. So they start having hallucinations, seeing things or hearing things that's not there, and they actually react to them. They may also get what we know as a delusion, which is basically a false belief that they are very fixated and preoccupied about, and there's no way that you can convince them otherwise. So very common in a lot of our patients, actually paranoia. So they are paranoid that their helper is stealing from them, their children trying to harm them. So that's actually part of the BPSD as well. So these two categories are quite common, and as the elderly start to be more advanced in the dementia, then they will start to have some other BPSD like movements problems whereby they are very repetitive. I have patients in advanced dementia whereby they start to unbutton their clothes, they start to keep taking off their clothes for no reason, or keep pulling on their diapers. So these are actually some of the motor function as well. What is a bit less known is actually a change in personality. And I have patients who came and the family is very concerned because they were very extroverted, very lively, and over a period of time they suddenly became very introverted, very cynical about life, very negative about life. So this is actually the personality change that can present in the BPSD. And in fact, in some of my patients with dementia, before the cognitive, the memory problem starts. All this actually happens first. It's actually very difficult to actually tell that it was dementia, but over time, when the memory problems start to surface, then we know it's actually dementia. So this is actually BPSD, and BPSD is actually quite frequent, so statistics from the countries like US, UK actually shows that 60 up to 80% of patients with dementia have BPSD, and our local state data actually shows that up to 70% of them actually has BPSD. And if you look at a cross-sectional point of view, which means currently for the past 1 month, 1/3 of dementia patients actually have at least 3 of these symptoms. So it is something that is very problematic, that sense very challenging for a caregiver. So I thought I will share my time to talk about this. Yes.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chris. So we have now got to know about cognitive and non-cognitive symptoms of dementia. Thank you so much. Over to you, Dr. Farhan. Everyone is worried about dementia, and you deal with many patients. What are their concerns? Could you please share more?
Thank you, Amita. Definitely, dementia is a huge concern, and we can't talk about the topic today, mental health and the elderly, without talking about dementia. So Dr. Chris is a psychiatrist, like he's mentioned. The word dementia, it actually comes from the mind, that there's something wrong with the mind. And it was described centuries ago in an older person where they start to become forgetful, that there's something wrong with the mind. So people thought, okay, send this patient to the psychiatrist because there's something. But do you know that you can decrease your risk of dementia very, very significantly? So my patients and their relatives, they get so worried because they say, hey, mom has dementia. Sometimes mom and dad have dementia. Does it mean like my chances of dementia is 100%? Am I going to get dementia, doctor? I'm really worried and I can't do anything about my genes. I mean, none of us can do anything about our genes, right, Amita? We can't choose mom and dad. I love you, mom and dad, by the way. I'm sure they're watching. They're so supportive of whatever I do. So if we can't change our genes, what then can we do? There's so much that we can do in terms of our lifestyle. And it's actually recently thought, and this is a new thought, that the prevention of dementia should have a life course approach. It means that as children, I'm a mother of 4 children, and as children we can do something to prevent our children's risk of dementia. In middle life, I mean, Chris and I were chatting and we graduated about the same time. So I suppose we are sort of we are midlife. There's a lot that we can do in terms of lifestyle, managing our risk factors for diseases like diabetes, hypertension, and there's so much that we can do for our parents and our grandparents to prevent their risk of getting this terrible illness which doesn't have a cure at the moment.
Thank you so much, Dr. Farhan. So I am first time hearing that we can decrease our risk of dementia. And you know what, I used to think like, oh my God, probably it runs in the family. And sometime or the other, probably it's a matter of time or something. So I think it's good news.
It's definitely good news, yes.
Wow.
And with longevity comes opportunity. We shouldn't be afraid of aging. We should embrace it because we're so lucky we live in Singapore and in Malaysia as well, where we are going to live really, really long. Yeah.
Okay, that's fantastic. It's good news. I think this show I'm even more excited to know more what's going to go on and how we are going to learn how to take care of our elderly and their mental health, as well as caregivers, what we would be doing. Thank you so much, panelists. And dear viewers, if you have any questions, any comments, any concerns, please feel free to write on the comment section and we will get our panelists to answer your questions as much as possible. So of course, Prof, I'm going to move on to you. Just want to share something with you. Like, of course, we heard about the cognitive, the non-cognitive, and as well as dementia can definitely be cured. So what I would want to find out is how are elderly with dementia coping, since they are, either stuck at home or, based on what they are going through, the cognitive or the non-cognitive side. Could you please share more about that?
Yeah. When someone is suspected to have dementia, first of all, we should differentiate it from some dementia mimics or some forms of treatable dementia before branding them as demented patients. The first and foremost is we have to differentiate dementia from delirium and depression. What is delirium is, it is an acute confusional state. You see, elderly will be taking some medications for a lot of medications which is taken for even pain relief like codeine, and for cough syrup medications, and some sedative, sometimes antipsychotics medications, all can cause delirium and acute confusional state, which is actually confused with dementia. And depression, which compromises your appetite, your sleep, and your activity, can sometimes exactly mimic like dementia, and with proper examination investigations, we can differentiate a depression. And when it comes to some people, whether they have habit of taking some toxinous materials, or even chronic alcoholism, intake of alcohol in a binge drinking for a longer time can result in dementia. In addition, there are some CNS infection, which is called the infections of the brain, or the infection of the coverings of the brain can mimic like dementia. So these are the things we have to differentiate. And when it comes to infection, there are something called SSPE. That is infection which is associated with measles, which normally the children get, which is a late complication of measles. That one can present like dementia. And we have to rule out, obviously, syphilis and HIV/AIDS group of infections we need to exclude. There are a lot of, when it comes to dementia, there are some tools which to examine the patient whether they have dementia or not. The commonly employed tool is MMSE, which is called mini mental state examination. This examines a different task in the form of, for example, asking for the year, month, date, and you give 3 objects name, ask them to repeat. So there are some domains to examine, ask them to write a meaningful sentence, copy a figure, and you give 3 objects, ask after 5 minutes. So there are some tests to think. There are a lot of tests. You give a clock and you ask the patient to draw a clock with a 10 past 11, whether they are putting the numbers properly. Is there any disorientation while putting the numbers? Is there any arms properly put? All these things. There are many tools like this. Then we have got blood test to rule out whether the patient has got any risk factor, any genetic positivity for the dementia. And more than this, there are some investigation which need to do in blood test. For example, vitamin B12. You all know that there are B complex vitamins. One of the vitamin is B12 vitamin, which is required for the normal neuronal functioning. This will be deficient in some patients, especially when the patient is a vegetarian, or when the patient has some stomach or bowel diseases. The absorption of vitamin B12 will be affected, which can result in dementia. For your information, this kind of dementia, if you test serum B12 level and if it is low, if you supplement, if you give injection vitamin B12, it is reversible. So that is very important. Then another one is thyroid function. When the thyroid level is low in the body, it can also cause dementia. So it can, if you give thyroxine, it is easily correctable. And there are some conditions called whenever there is brain is covered with dura, the covering. Sometimes a small injury can cause bleeding under the dura. If it is left untreated or not identified on time, it causes a compression of the brain and it affects the brain function and it can cause dementia. So that one, if you do a scan, brain scan like a CT scan or MRI scan, you can find out that one, and you can, if you evacuate the blood clot, the patient can totally recover from the dementia part. And there is something called normal pressure hydrocephalus. Whenever there is dementia comes, the brain shrinks, right? So when the brain shrinks, there is a cavity starting from the brain running into the spinal cord, ventricle. There is a fluid inside which is called cerebrospinal fluid. So that cavity will become bigger when the brain shrinks in dementia. In normal pressure hydrocephalus, there is a dilatation of the tunnel, the ventricle, but the brain shrinkage is not enough to compensate. So these patients, actually they present with not only dementia, and they have unsteadiness, ataxia, and urinary incontinence. Very commonly they have urinary incontinence. So someone in elderly have dementia, urinary incontinence, and ataxic, I mean difficulty in walking, ataxic gait, you suspect normal pressure hydrocephalus, which can be corrected and the patient dementia can be reversed. And when it comes to main, after excluding all this, you come to a primary dementia. There are few types of dementia. The common one being Alzheimer's disease, which everyone knows. The Alzheimer's disease is nothing but problem with proteins. I'll say the proteins play an abnormal role in Alzheimer's disease. There is there is something called amyloid protein. There is a pathway in every people. There is a pathway which it is divided and goes into a normal pathway. In patients who have a genetic influence, it goes into an abnormal pathway, producing a beta amyloid, which gets deposited in the brain. And also there is another protein called tau protein, and that one forms some neurofibrillary tangles, some collection of material which is deposited into the cell and finally kills the cell. So the cell's neuronal loss happens. And when it comes to function, it mainly depends upon two neurotransmitters. There are some substance in the brain which is called like the hormones, which is required for the normal function and memory. So one is called acetylcholine. So the transmitter, its levels comes down. There is another neurotransmitter named glutamic acid, otherwise called glutamate. Its level goes up and which can kills the cells. So when it produces overexcitation and kills the cell. So basically, reduced acetylcholine, increased glutamate is the basis for the problems in Alzheimer's disease. This is the commonest, and it forms about 50% of all dementias. The next one is called vascular dementia. It is nothing but old people are more prone to develop stroke, and when there is a multiple stroke or a major stroke, it can result in dementia, which is called vascular dementia. And for your information, Asian people are more prone to develop vascular dementia rather than Alzheimer's disease. There are some other type called frontotemporal dementia. That is, the front part of the brain is only affected. The back is not affected and produce a gap in the front. And this one, as Dr. Chris put it, this one, normally the other dementias, first the memory decline, the behavioral symptoms just follow. In frontotemporal dementia, the behavioral symptoms come first and memory decline comes later. And another one called Lewy body dementia, where there are some inclusions have put in this cytoplasm of the cell, which this group of patients, they have hallucination, as Chris was mentioning about hallucination. And this group of patients, they have predominantly hallucinations and can behave like a Parkinson patient. There is slowness in addition to all cognitive decline. And people will be alarmed to see someone is having very pathological abnormal hallucination always they will be talking, they will be hearing sound, reacting to it kind of thing. And when the definition of dementia comes, always we need to tell that it is a progressive decline, not a fast decline. It's a progressive decline in the cognitive function. Why we need to know this? There is some condition called Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. It's called CJD. It is because of a slow virus called prions. It is a protein kind of material, but they say that it could be a slow virus. So this one, when it infects the brain, it causes a very rapidly onset and progressive dementia. So when someone has dementia which is progressing and coming to the death in 6 months' time, you have to be very careful. It is not a primary degenerative dementia. It is a secondary to prion infection. And like earlier, I said CNS infection, and this infection is also one of the things we should keep it in mind. And when the primary risk factor being advancement in the age. So when the age is 70 years, the calculation is 15 out of 1,000 people will have developed dementia, but every 5 years it doubles. When it comes to 100 years, possibly 400 to 500 people out of 1,000, almost 1 in 2 people will have dementia. So to that extent it goes, and this is where we need to emphasize the role of caregivers. And the caregivers, when they have to confirm that someone has dementia, their role becomes a very, very important one. And first, the caregivers, they should know what is dementia. They should know what we were talking about, all this. They should know all these facts. What is dementia? What are the expectations of the elders? And they should keep up the consultations of the patients and the medicines promptly given on time, so that their burden comes down. Suppose the patient is wandering in the night without sleeping, the patient is going to put a burden on caregivers. So the tablets for the patients have to be given on correct time, and they have to take care of themselves. If there is medical illness for caregivers, they have to take care of themselves. And because of this excessive work, it might put them into a frustration mood and a depression. So they have to plan, and they have to have an alternate person for the care, or they have to join support group like Jamia. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Quite a lot was a bit more in layman terms, so a person like me, I could understand. Previously, the thought which I had about dementia was just like, oh my God, but seems like, there are stages and things like that. So thanks for breaking it down in simple words, Prof. Over to Chris. So Dr. Chris, what are some of the challenges faced by the elderly with dementia and their caregivers? Could you please share more?
Yeah, all right. So, the physical challenges of the elderly with dementia, I think that is something that a lot of people are quite aware of as well. The increase of nursing need, when their activities of daily living actually become more dependent. And sometimes, you have to actually have more than one caregiver to care for the elderly. Right, so that's the physical part. So, as mentioned earlier on, I would like to focus a little bit more on the BPSD. So I also highlight that BPSD actually causes a lot of caregiver distress. And as mentioned earlier on, the number of elderly with BPSD is actually quite high. So I thought I would share a little bit about, what are the potential causes, so we understand why is this BPSD happening. And when I say causes, it might be a misnomer, right? I would actually tend to explain that what are the contributing factors, because a lot of times you can't really find one single cause of BPSD. And if you really want to find a cause, you also cannot rule out that is, part of it has to do with the fact that the brain has been affected, right? Like what Prof mentioned earlier on, the various mechanisms that was involved in the brain changes. Is it shrinking? Is it because the cells are dying? Is it because of the pressure? So, we can't negate that, but what we know is BPSD arises because of the combination, it's an interaction of the underlying brain problem plus environmental factors, right? So I thought the external factors is something that as caregiver, we will be able to actually intervene to actually help to manage some of this problem. So the external factors are actually divided broadly into number 1, the physical state of the elderly, number 2, the environment, and number 3, the communications and the tasks that the elderly has to actually partake in. So the physical state, simply put, basically physical discomfort. Anything, hungry, thirsty, pain, too cold, too hot, itch, the itch at the back that you just can't scratch. But elderly, sometimes they're limited motions, right? They just can't scratch the back. Can you imagine if you have an itch for the whole night and you can't scratch it? How would you feel? If it's one night, okay, you feel very irritable, but imagine if you have it for days, weeks, and even months, and nobody know about that. So that's actually one of the very common causes of BPSD for elderly to be agitated. And this is actually a very big problem in a more advanced dementia patient. In a mild stage whereby the elderly can still express themselves, this is not a problem, right? They will just tell you, I'm itchy, can you help me to scratch? Or I feel hungry, can you feed me? But for more advanced dementia patient who lose the ability to tell you their problems, it's going to be very challenging because there's a lot of guessing work going on. So that's the physical part. The second part is environment. Environment refers to the location, the place, and the people in the location, the people around them. Elderly patients actually like consistency. They don't like changes, and they don't like environment that's too stimulating. So, that's why, we don't recommend you to bring their dementia parents to shopping mall, whereby it's very crowded, so many people walking around, so many lights, so many things. They will get even more confused. They enjoy a peaceful walk at the park, whereby, it's actually quieter and less movement, so they will actually keep them calm as well. Actually, one of the very common causes of BPSD is also a change in location. Because nowadays a lot of the elderlies have multiple caregivers. Like, for example, this week you stay at my house, next week you stay at my brother's place, and then the other week you stay at my sister's place. So this frequent changing in the caregiving place can actually cause a lot of confusion. Because remember, dementia patients sometimes don't remember where they are, and they don't remember what happened yesterday. So you could have moved them to your brother's place, and then they'll be wondering, hey, why am I here? Where's this place? I don't remember why you shift me here, and then get really upset. And or change in person as well. So sometimes, a lot of the family actually engage foreign domestic helper to help in the caregiving. And sometimes, when the helper contract is up, you have no choice. They don't want to extend their contract, and you do have to get a new helper in, and that can actually create problems as well. So these two are actually the main most common causes of BPSD. Less common ones are more to do with communications and tasks related. So for example, as Prof had mentioned earlier on as well, dementia patients, their processing speed is slower, they can't remember things that well. So, a lot of times families do expect them to function as per normal. I have patients' family who, out of goodwill, they actually want the mom to be able to still function normally. So they will, insist that, okay, you go out, okay, and you go and do some grocery shopping. Right? But she really cannot manage the money, and she gets really, really anxious about it. And sometimes it's just a matter of breaking down the task into simpler steps and making things easier for them. And communication is also one problem. A lot of the family also felt that the elderly would be able to communicate as per in the past, but the loss in the ability to understand language and the loss in the ability to express themselves that well is part of the dementia symptoms. So if you talk to them like the speed I'm talking now, they won't understand, right? When I talk to my patient, I have to deliberately slow down, okay, so that they can understand what I'm talking about, right? So you do have to make the extra effort to actually help that. So BPSD is very distressing to caregiver. In fact, studies have shown that BPSD symptoms in dementia patients is highly associated with caregiver stress, and is associated with longer hospital stays, more clinic visit, and also, associated with more decreased quality of life in caregiver as well. So what do we actually know about our local caregiver? Prof actually mentioned about our local caregiver, there's caregiver stress. So I actually obtained these numbers from the WISE study that was done locally in 2013. So our local caregiver profile, 3/4 of them are women, they are married, and they're staying with the person with dementia. Slightly more than half of them are working, all right? And they're actually in the age group of 50 to 64. So what does that mean? And in fact, slightly more than half of them are daughters to the person with with dementia. So what does that mean? That means our caregiver are superwoman, right? They are fantastic. Can you imagine? You need to work, you need to take care of the household, you need to take care of the children, sometimes even grandchildren, and depending on whether the husband may actually need some support as well. right? And you have your own social needs, you have your own friends, your own family, and then supporting the parents with dementia. It is really a tall task, and it's actually extremely challenging. So I think like what Prof has mentioned, I echo. Caregiver stress is actually very, very important, and it's very prevalent as well. In fact, studies have shown that caregiver to people with dementia, compared to just caregiver to normal elderly, they are 2.5 times more likely to have psychiatric conditions, especially depression and anxiety. And you can imagine that, having to juggle all these things. And these are just the practical aspect of it. And not to forget what, the emotional aspect. As caregiver, 24 hours you are with your loved ones and you actually see them decline physically and cognitively. And a lot of caregiver comes to me and they will say this, I don't recognize my parents anymore, right? And they have to bear with this emotional aspect as well. And at the same time, as what Dr. Farhan had mentioned earlier on, also this fear about what about myself? If my mom and dad has dementia, am I going to get it? And if I have children, are my children going to get it? So there's actually a lot of things going on. So caregiver distress is real, and later on we'll talk more about that as well. Right? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chris. I think a lot of us can relate to it. Most of us have heard, some of us who are caregivers are going through it. And I think most of us don't want to go through it. Yes. So I think I would just move to Dr. Farhan. I guess you're going to talk about is what should we do to prevent it? Is dementia preventable? Can you please guide us?
Okay. To be honest, I'm not going to tell you anything that will surprise you. All the advice that I'm going to give is what your taxi uncle will tell you, But then maybe taxi uncle, if they tell you, you may not take the advice. So today, doctor will tell you, and I will, tell you what's scientifically proven to prevent dementia. So what Chris said was really interesting, and I was looking at the statistics that he's shown. It's true that most caregivers are women. But who do you think brings the patient to the hospital? Taxi uncle. So one of the sons, who's a taxi driver, because he has a flexible schedule, he has a vehicle, so he will bring mom or dad. So taxi uncle will tell you to go to school. Why is education important? There's this whole idea of cognitive reserve, which means if you start off educated and you start to age. So let's say, Amita, we all take a memory test now. How many points do you think you would get out of 100? 100, yeah, I think you'll get 100 because you remember everything
100.
Prof told you. Yeah.
Maybe about 60.
60, okay, that's a very modest score. So if you take the same memory test at 80, what do you think you would score at 60? I mean, when you're 80.
When I'm 80,
yeah,
right?
if you today you got 60 at 80.
20.
Is it? Okay. So if you start off high, let's say your memory is great, so you got 100. At 80, maybe you got 80 points, But let's say you start at 60, like you said, you start at 60. So all of us would go down, So at 60, maybe you go down 20 points. So you come down to 40. And the passing mark is 50. Yeah, so education is really important. Everybody will decline, and Prof mentioned earlier about normal aging. Memory loss is a part of normal aging. All of us would lose a little bit of memory, but it doesn't have to go down so steep that it becomes dementia. And not all memory loss is equivalent to dementia as well. I'm sure Dr. Chris and myself and Prof, we deal with all sorts of elderly patients, and sometimes an older person may appear depressed, and when they are depressed, this can look like a dementia. They can start becoming forgetful. So depression, it's a very, very terrible illness, and it can sort of accelerate. It can make you have a higher risk of dementia. If you have dementia and you get depression, it may worsen the situation as well. So I talked about education, and then I talked about depression. Yeah. So in middle life, if we look at the brain as a very vascular organ, it means it has a lot of blood vessels. So anything that's bad for your blood vessels would increase your risk of dementia. So taxi uncle said don't smoke. Yeah, even mommy said don't smoke. So smoking is really, really toxic to the brain. If you smoke, your risk of dementia is increased. And recently, a new risk factor has emerged, which is air pollution. So they found that people who lived in areas with high air pollution, they had higher risk of dementia. And it's thought that the pollutants in air is similar to what's in cigarette smoke. Yeah, so that's really interesting. If you're above 40, you should definitely get yourself screened for diabetes. It may not have any symptoms. Diabetes itself, even without stroke, increases your risk of dementia. If you have a stroke, that's a main cause of dementia because, again, when we talk about reserve, you know how much brain you have. If you have a stroke, you may like cut away 20% of your brain function. So stroke itself is a cause of dementia. Besides that, alcohol is really bad for your brain. Hearing impairment is a very, very interesting risk factor. Hearing impairment should be treated because if somebody is living in a silent world, it increases their risk of dementia. They are just less stimulated. If you have an older person at home and they are starting to get a little bit of hearing loss, they are getting hard of hearing, very often they miss out on conversations. They are unable to participate in watching this video, for example. And what happens with the lack of stimulation is that it increases their risk of dementia because there is a anti-dementia slogan, which is use it or lose it. If you don't use your brain, you start to lose it. Other factors in an older person include social isolation. We are meant to live together. You know, no man is an island. If a person is lonely, then their risk of depression, their risk of health, physical illness and decline in their health is great. And their risk of dementia is increased as well. So there's really lots that we can do to prevent this terrible illness.
So, Dr. Farhan, you said so many things, right? It's education, depression, smoking and air pollution, diabetes, stroke, hearing impairment, social isolation, and you are saying use it or lose it.
Yes, 100
Yeah.
points, 100 points.
And more than 80.
I was just paying attention and getting your points. Okay, use your brain. You're saying. I think your message is it is preventable,
Yes,
but use your brain.
that's right. And you have to say it with a taxi uncle accent. Use your brain or
Use your brain. I think you say it nicer. Okay, I think what Dr. Farhan is trying to emphasize is we have to try this with our kids from the young age as well as applies to all of us through our mid-age and as we grow older. So education is important. At the same time, you know, if you see signs of depression, do something, avoid smoking and take care of your health, which would take care, you know, like see if you can not get diabetes, stroke, and so on. And so I think the message is we need to take care of ourselves. Yeah. Okay. So I'm sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Farhan. Thank you so much to all the panelists for all your advice and the insights. We're going to look at some questions from our viewers. And I'm sure viewers also have benefited on what we have been hearing. So let us look at our first question. So from Farida, how long does dementia take to develop before we see warning signs? How do we slow this forgetting process? Professor, could you please help us with this?
Person to person, depending upon what are the other comorbidities or what are the other medical illnesses they have, and it depends not only that one. When we first examine what is the score the patient has got, and so it all depends upon how eagerly he is willing to do, as Dr. Farhan was telling, the preventive measures. Like you take care of your health, you control your blood pressure, you control your sugar, and you do exercise regularly, don't smoke, don't take alcohol. All these things, if you just follow these measures very carefully and continuously, you do a regular exercise, you have a healthy diet. So it depends upon how you follow these advices, then you can prevent or you can delay the advanced stage of dementia. So it all depends upon the comorbidities in the patient and how willingly they take the preventive measures.
Present very, very late. They don't come when, mom's starting to have trouble finding her way back from the toilet. She keeps asking for food. These are all middle to late stage symptoms of dementia. And how do we slow this process? There are tablets that can help not cure the dementia, but it can slow down it can slow down this disease, and you can maintain mom at where she is right now. So I think that's a really important point, that we need to find out what are the early stages, what are the early warning signs, and know that there is treatment, there's dementia treatment available.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Farhan. Our next question is from Adeline. Is it true that encouraging parents to play games like word search, etc., will reduce the possibility for them to get dementia? Dr. Kristan, would you want to add?
Yes. All right. So I will echo what everyone has mentioned earlier on, Prof and Dr. Farhan, which is actually the whole idea is about using the brain, right? Use it or you risk losing it, right? So if the elderly likes to do the word search, yes, by all means go ahead. But it doesn't mean that you must do something cognitively very challenging, and it doesn't mean that you must do something very academic as well. I think the whole idea is to actually to expose the brain to do things. There are some studies that was done who actually suggest that what the elderly needs to do is actually to constantly learn new things. So even if it's not something very mental, even if it's something very simple like dancing, right, learning some cooking or learning painting, you are actually exploring, you are activating different parts of the brain. So all these things will actually work towards, kind of the prevention. So I just hope your viewers and audience don't get too. So you're not getting your parents prepared for PSLE or schools and examinations, okay? So it's really just about getting them to actually learn things and continue to do things. That'll be fine. And I think one of the challenges sometimes is a lot of elderlies don't like to learn new things, right? They are very used to what they have been doing. It's okay. All you need to do is actually to encourage them to continue doing what they are doing so that they don't lose it.
Adding to that question, Dr. Chris, I have heard people saying, right, from before dementia strikes, start playing brain games. Is it even necessary? Like if we are active in our day-to-day work and all that, is it necessary at this age with no symptoms? Should we play these brain games?
You mean when we are at our age?
Like me, I myself, like now at this age, right? I get told sometimes, do you play brain games? I'm like, do I have to? So my question is, do I have to?
I would say that currently there's no evidence to say that, if you're currently active, right, in your lifestyle, you're working, you are doing a lot of things, there's no evidence to say that, doing all these things will have like the added benefits in terms of preventing dementia. But having said so, these brain games do, kind of like train the different parts of your brain. Because if you look at some of these apps, they actually train different aspects. Some train your visual, spatial, some train about memory, language, and things like that. So even though we are active, we may be more active in certain area, but not in others. So there are still some benefits in doing it as a general, overall cognitive well-being in that sense. But most importantly, you must enjoy doing it. Okay, if you don't enjoy the process, then I would say don't do it.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Chris. Let's look at our next question. This is from Zuraida. What can caregivers do to cope with the caregiving stress? Prof, would you want to add to this?
Yeah, as I already mentioned, when there is stress, they should have advance plan. They should plan in advance that to take care of themselves, maybe a pleasurable event or medical problems, appointment, whatever it is. To take care of themselves, they have to have alternate plan, and somebody will come and relieve them like this, so that they have their own time. They are not stressed out. And as I said, the other health groups, they have to join. And there are some countries where the caregivers, the respite care is being very well taken. So they have to join in associations so that they are given some time off from taking care of the elders. Because when the caregivers sometimes suddenly, when not only they are taking care of the patient, but in addition, the leading the leader of the house role comes. They have to make up the finances. They have to take the decisions for the house. So suddenly, unexpectedly, which they were not at all doing, suddenly there is a responsibility coming in. So it is a big stress to them. So they have to plan in advance. They have to get help from others. They have to inform others that they have the replacement, like, and join help groups so that their stress is relieved.
Thank you so much, Prof. Let's look at our next question. This is from Shafika. So the dementia patients like routine, just like children with autism. Do dementia patients become more childlike the worse dementia becomes? Dr. Farhan, would you want to take that?
It's a really interesting question.
Yeah.
And I suppose there are some similarities if you think about it, in a way that mom and dad may need help in feeding, they may start needing diapers, and then you think, this person is becoming like baby, like they're eating purees and mash. But I feel that the difference here is that they've had their whole life, they've had all their life experience, and a child is brand new. So mom and dad they have preferences, they've had hobbies. I looked after a pianist, a tiny little lady who used to play the piano live for ballet dancing. So even though she's forgotten so many things and she's even sort of lost her ability to speak, she still sits at her piano every day at the same time and plays beautiful music. So I think we shouldn't forget the person that they are. Mom and dad's still there. A child is brand new. So there are similarities, but it's vastly different.
Thank you so much. Dr. Farhan, the way you always say mom and dad, right? It just reminds, like, don't treat them as strangers.
Yeah.
They are still our mom and dad, and that is probably the most important part in their well-being.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Let's look at our next question. So this is from Sharifa. Thank you for a great session. Grateful if you could explain the types of dementia medication, how they work. Okay, it's a long question. If it is effective for every person with dementia, and the side effects of dementia medication, and what are the non-pharmacological treatments. Grateful also for an explanation on the interface between dementia and mental health. Okay, Dr. Chris.
Yeah. Okay. So I suggest maybe we can split the
let's
question.
take a bit. Yeah.
Don't make me answer the whole thing.
No, because I thought since Prof is there, Prof can actually helps to actually talk about the anti-dementia medication. Because the reason why is because we actually use a variety of medications. There's anti-dementia medication which focus on slowing down the process of the degeneration. So in a way, it translates to slowing down the cognitive process. When a patient starts having some behavioral disturbances like BPSD, as I mentioned earlier on, the first line approach is always non-pharmacological. So that's what we will always try to do, which I can elaborate a bit later. But when that fails, then sometimes we do have to bring additional medication, which includes things like antipsychotic, antidepressant, and also some mood stabilizer. So there's actually a range of them. Different medication have different side effects. But maybe I can just touch on the non-pharmacological treatment. So non-pharmacological treatment, basically it means non-medical, using non-medicine. In most of the specialist hospital, even clinic, they do have the support from allied health. So, for example, psychologists or even occupational therapists. So they can actually come in to help to do some of this treatment. The principle of this treatment is very simple. I'll link back to what I mentioned earlier on, which is the causes. Right. So in order for us to treat some of these behavioral or symptoms, we need to find out what is the cause. So you have to go down a little bit of a checklist to see, okay, is it physical? Let's check, is mom and dad having any pain? Is there any itch? Was he passing motion daily? Was there any urinary problems? And things like that. Once that is done, okay, so maybe not, okay, there's no infection. Let's move on. Whether is it the environment? Oh, did we change something recently? Did we change that mattress? Maybe he's not used to it. Did we change his diet? We need to change again. Or we change a helper and things like that. So it's really a lot of investigative work to find out what could be causing it. So after that has been done, then they also teach caregiver on how to actually kind of like communicate with the elderly. A lot of reassurance. They will teach them distraction technique, or sometimes just explain how to actually keep them safe, but just let them be alone. Make sure that they are not at risk to themselves, but just give them time to cool down and don't keep confronting them.
Thank you, Dr. Chris. Professor, would you want to add and answer some of it?
Yeah, basically, there is a non-pharmacological, which is without drugs we give, as Dr. Chris put it. There are few choices of non-pharmacological therapy, which will give little soothing effect to the patient, as well as give comfort, and as well as the cognitive function improve. And there are few things like music therapy, where you just play a classical music in the night. With aromatherapy, you just put some oil and ask them to inhale the vaporization, which all is found to have a positive effect. And something called art therapy. So art therapy is just show them the art so that they can enjoy the art, which kindles the connections of memory. And something called reminiscence therapy, where you just play the videos of early functions where they actively participated, so that they just themselves see, and it just stimulates the memory circuits, and the cognitive function might improve. And pet therapy. So pet therapy is a very good one. Recently, it has been found that pet therapy helps the dementia patients to improve their day-to-day functioning. And without forgetting exercises. Exercises definitely delays the progression of dementia. It improves mood and sleep, and it improves the balance as well. These are all non-pharmacological therapy. Coming to pharmacological therapy, depends whether we give for cognitive functions or we give for behavioral functions. And Dr. Chris put it, definitely the behavioral functions needs antipsychotic, antidepressant kind of medication. When it comes to cognitive function, as I said earlier, the basic principle is acetylcholine is decreased and glutamate is increased. So the two main drugs based on this principle. So there are some drugs called acetylcholinesterase inhibitor, like rivastigmine, for example. That one increases acetylcholine level, which actually decrease in patients. And there are some drugs called memantine, which reduces the glutamate level, which actually there is increase, which causes the damage. I think I want to make it clear. The two drugs mainly employed based on the neurotransmitter mechanism. So one is to increase the acetylcholine level, the other one is to decrease the glutamate level. So this is for cognition and behavior. And non-pharmacological therapy is a wide variety of therapy. When it combined with pharmacological therapy, it is going to prove very much better.
Thank you so much, Prof. Dr. Farhan, anything quickly would you want to add to that long question?
Well, dementia medications are generally very mild. Not everyone responds to it. And when a medication is very mild, it doesn't have like a great effect, therefore it doesn't cure dementia. but it has very few side effects as well. So the main side effect would be in the tummy. They may get a bit of nausea, they may not eat so well, but a lot of times they get used to it, and it's transient, this tummy side effect.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Farhan. Viewers, thank you so much for sending your questions. I'm sure this topic can go on forever and ever, and there's so much more we can keep learning. So I must say thank you to the panelists, and what I would want to do is, before we move to the next segment, I just would want to share what is our topic for the next session. The next session, we're just going to look at the topic first. Okay, definitely it's going to be another interesting topic. So it's going to be on positive mindset for children, youth, and parents. I think I'm looking forward to hosting that session, definitely. And back to our panelists, dear panelists and speakers, as a concluding statement, what would you say? So, Prof, over to you on your concluding statements on today's topic.
We have been talking about the dementia patients' care and caregivers' care, and I think there was a small area was not covered. Just when the patients were the dementia patients, the bedroom, we have to make some little modifications. The sharp objects, sharp ends all have to be removed, and the floor mat where the very soft cushion kind of materials, even if the patient have tendency to fall, the injuries should be avoided, things we should put. And there has to be the display of very big pictures of family pictures, and a big clock and a very big calendar, so that it gives a better orientation to the patients. And their door, the bedroom door, should not be locked. Maybe a curtain or a chain lock, which can be operated from outside rather than from inside, so that the wandering habit in the night time can be prevented. And the washroom door should be always open with the lights on. So these are the things will help the day-to-day care of the patients. And we have already covered the management part, I mean non-pharmacological and pharmacological. There are some research things definitely will go on. So the patients and the caregivers, they should accept for any research, participating in the research, so that we can get new outbreaks in the, new drugs or new agents. There are some trials going on now. They are planning for, like, now we have got for COVID, we have got vaccine. I think in Singapore, I think you all got vaccinated, I think.
Yeah, I got vaccinated yesterday.
Yes.
Yeah.
All the doctors
Still here, I'm here today. I'm alive.
Yay!
So the same thing, like there are trials going on to give vaccines to the protein which gives an abnormal pathway, right? So the vaccines, they are trying to prevent that abnormal pathway to go only in the normal pathway, and after Ronald Reagan, the stem cells research has become one of the main stay in the treatment. And now they are doing some research on nerve growth factor, where normally it is synthesized in the nerves, but because of the blood-brain barrier, it doesn't enter into the brain. So they are trying to inject into the CSF space, or transplanting into the brain, so that it grows and it occupies the spaces, so that the brain try to becomes normal. So there are so much of genetic engineering is going on. So we all must be aware of all this. And there was one urine test which can simply diagnose the dementia, like neural thread protein, which is being developed, not yet come. So finally, the caregivers, I want to say a few words. When you are having problem with the patients, never argue, instead agree. Never lecture, instead reassure. Never force, instead reinforce. Never say I told you, Instead, repeat. Never command or demand, encourage and praise them. Yeah, it will be good for the patients as well as for the caregivers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Very, very wise words. In other words, be patient with our parents in case they are going through dementia. Thank you so
Yes.
much, Prof. Dr. Chris, your
Yeah.
concluding remarks, please.
All right. My concluding remarks will be focusing on caregivers again, because you know what we call them? We actually call them the invisible patient. They're always there with the patient. They're always in the background. Actually, in my clinic, I always spend a few minutes just to talk to the caregiver, to check on how they are, because I recognize that's how important their role is. So I'm just going to mention, caregiving is a job, all right? But it's not a job whereby you have a boss to report to. It's not a job whereby you can apply leave, okay? And it's a job that you are not paid for. It's a self-governing job, it's a higher order job. And like all work and job, you can get burnout. So it's important for caregivers, you should look out for signs of burnout. Very quickly, I will just summarize. Number one, when you start having sleepless nights, okay, when you start worrying about your responsibility, that's usually the very first sign. And usually after that, you will lead to exhaustion. Because you don't sleep well, you get physically exhausted. After a while, you may get mentally exhausted. How do you know you're mentally exhausted? That's when you not want to think about anything anymore. You're blocking it, you're avoiding, because you are already, there mentally, psychologically. So that is exhaustion. And by the time you reach exhaustion stage, it's actually time for you to seek help. If not, you'll go on to the next level whereby you start to get frustration, right? Irritability, a little bit of things, you'll get very angry. And then that's also when a lot of unhappiness will start at home. And then you slowly move on to a sense of hopelessness, whereby you feel that nothing's going to work anymore. And then some of the caregivers actually go on to further to like a bit of an end stage kind of burnout, whereby they just feel that I'm a failure. I can't do this. I can't do this anymore. It's not me, and I'm not doing a good job. So if you wait till the last few stages of this burnout, I think it's not just bad for you, it's actually bad for the mom and dad that you are caring for as well. As caregivers, it's important to take care of yourself. If not, how are you going to take care of your parents? So some tips, okay? Essentially, the general principle is what you are doing for your mom and dad, do it for yourself. All right? If you keep them well physically, they eat well, they sleep well, right? They exercise, you do the same as well, right? You need to take care of that. Develop a network, like what a lot of the panelists I mentioned earlier on. Join caregiver work group, right? Learn from them, okay? Everyone is out there. Everyone is doing this for the first time. No one has taken care of dementia parents before. It will always be your first, and it's everyone's first. So learn from one another. Sometimes we get into this, cycle whereby we thought we are doing the right thing and this is the only way to do it. I mean, that happens in our workplace as well, right? But when you start to meet other people, you realize that, oh, you are doing it like this, and oh, it actually works for you. Maybe I should go and try. So do that. And the most important thing I'll mention in the last bit is a lot of caregivers, they will tell me that, where got time? I need to take care of my mom and dad 24 hours. Where to find time? So there's just one small trick. And it's just not just caregiving. Even let's say at work, you feel that you are tight for time. Have a calendar, have a timetable, okay? We tend to clock things that we need to do, like bring mom for appointment, my own appointment, pick sons out from tuition center and things like that. Have you ever logged in a 2 hours break to say me time? Okay, have a me time, plot it in, make it compulsory for you, just like you have to spend a 4 hours appointment with your mom, have a 4 hours appointment with yourself, okay? Decide what you want to do. Go shopping, meet your friends, or just stay at home, watch TV, all right? But before you do that, of course, you then have to reach out to arrange for caregiving arrangement. It can be done, and there's actually a lot of services out there who can help you to do it, all right? So take care of yourself.
Thank you, Dr. Chris. So only if we take care of ourselves, we can take care of our mom and dad. Okay, Dr. Farhan, your closing word.
So I think, Amita, none of us wants to live forever, right? Nobody wants to live for a long time. In fact, most of us would say we want to live well. We want to live well and be independent right till the end. Dementia is very debilitating. Nobody wants to be fed or tube fed or be on diapers and have someone bathe and change you. So none of us would approach retirement with $0 in our bank account. So we need to bank in our health retirement account as well. We need to start investing in ourselves. So me time, could mean exercise. What you eat matters. We should avoid obesity at all costs. And our lifestyles are just too sedentary. We need to get up, get active.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Farhan. Viewers, I learned a lot. I'm sure you all also have learned a lot. And this brings us to the end of our second episode. And what I would want to show is there's a project or the campaign which Jamia Singapore is working towards. So let's see the campaign. To support Jamia Food Bank's food donation drive, I would want to wish a very big thank you to our panelists for making time today and sharing a lot of information which is so important to us. Meanwhile, I just want to remind viewers, we still have our episode next Friday, same time. So I would see you all on Friday, 5th February at 8 p.m. And what we're going to talk about is positive mindset for children, youth, and parents. Have a restful night and a great weekend, and signing off from Jamia Singapore. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.